She told me I wasn't welcome at my own grandson's Christmas dinner. 3 days later, I called my attorney and removed her name from everything. I want you to understand something before I tell you the rest of this. I am not a bitter man. I have never been a bitter man. I spent 34 years as a structural engineer, raised my son Daniel mostly on my own after his mother passed, and I have always believed that family is the one thing worth protecting above all else. I still believe that. What changed is my understanding of who counts as family. My name is not important. What matters is that I am 67 years old. I live in a 3-bedroom house in Dayton, Ohio, that I paid off in full 18 years ago. And until 11 months ago, I was writing a check every single month to help my son and his wife cover their mortgage on a place in Columbus that they absolutely could not afford on their own. That check was for $2,300 every month, without fail. For 4 years, I never asked for gratitude. I never dangled it over anyone's head. I wrote the check because Daniel is my son, and because I wanted him to have stability, and because when they came to me and said they needed help, I looked at my retirement accounts and my pension, and I said yes. That is what fathers do. Melissa, my daughter-in-law, has a way of making you feel like whatever you give is both entirely expected and somehow not quite enough. I noticed it early on, maybe a year into their marriage, but I told myself I was being uncharitable. Daniel loved her. She made him happy, or she made him think he was happy, which at the time looked like the same thing. They had Ethan together, my grandson, who is now 6 years old and has his mother's dark eyes and my son's laugh, and for a long time that was enough to smooth over everything else. The first sign I should have paid more attention to came at Thanksgiving 2 years ago. I drove up to Columbus with a pecan pie I had made from scratch, the same recipe Margaret used every year before she got sick, and Melissa met me at the door and told me they were doing a new tradition that year, just the 3 of them, and maybe I could stop by for dessert. I stood on the porch with that pie in my hands and I said, of course, no problem at all, and I drove back to Dayton and ate leftover soup for Thanksgiving dinner. Daniel called the next morning and apologized. He said Melissa had been stressed about hosting. I said I understood. I did not say that I had been driving 4 hours round trip every Thanksgiving for 40 years because that is what the holidays are for. I just said I understood, and I meant it, and I kept writing the check. Here is the thing about people like Melissa. They do not come at you all at once. It happens in layers, slowly enough that each individual moment seems small, forgivable, explainable. A holiday here, a birthday there, a dinner where she introduces me to her friends as Daniel's father and then pivots the conversation before I can say 3 words. A Christmas gift that I bought for Ethan, a wooden train set I had spent 2 weeks searching for that appeared under the tree with a tag from the 2 of them. Not me. From Mom and Dad. I said nothing. I kept writing the check. Last December, I called Daniel in the first week of the month to ask about Christmas plans. We had talked the previous summer about me coming up and staying through the weekend, maybe taking Ethan to see the holiday lights downtown. Daniel seemed excited about it. He said he would check with Melissa and get back to me. He did not get back to me. I called again the week before Christmas, and Daniel answered, sounding uncomfortable in a way I have come to recognize. A particular flatness in his voice that means he is choosing his words carefully because someone is nearby. He said they were doing Christmas at home this year. Just the family. He said it would be easier. I asked if I was not family. There was a pause. He said Melissa needed a relaxed environment this year. He said she had been under a lot of pressure with her job. I said, Daniel, I have been driving to you for Christmas for 6 years. I have been writing a check every month for 4 years. I think I can manage to be a relaxed presence in a room for one evening. He lowered his voice then, and I could tell he had walked somewhere away from wherever she was, and he said, Dad, I am sorry. I cannot do this right now. And he said, Merry Christmas, and he hung up. I sat in my kitchen for a long time after that, not crying. I am past the age where things make me cry easily. Just sitting, with the phone on the table in front of me, thinking about Margaret, thinking about what she would say if she were here, thinking about the fact that I had spent 34 years making sure Daniel never wanted for anything and I was being managed out of Christmas by a woman who had never once in 4 years said a direct thank you for the money that kept the roof over her head. The next morning, I called my attorney. Gerald has handled my affairs for going on 20 years. He is a careful man, methodical, the kind who never speaks faster than necessary. I told him everything. Not the emotional version, just the facts. 4 years of monthly payments, the mortgage arrangement, the conversation with Daniel, the Thanksgiving 2 years ago, the train set under the tree with someone else's name on the tag. Gerald listened without interrupting. When I finished, he asked me 2 questions. He asked whether I had anything in writing about the mortgage payments, and I said no, it had always been informal, trust between family. He asked whether my estate documents still listed Daniel and Melissa as primary beneficiaries, and I said yes. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Walter, I think we have some work to do." We spent 3 hours in his office, the week between Christmas and New Year's. I told him I wanted to do 3 things. First, I wanted to stop the monthly payments immediately, not wind them down, not give 30 days notice, just stop. Second, I wanted to restructure my estate so that Daniel received a limited inheritance with conditions attached, and all remaining assets flowed into a trust for Ethan to be administered by Gerald's firm until my grandson turned 25. Third, I wanted to remove Melissa from my medical directive and my financial power of attorney, where she had been listed as backup since I added her 2 years ago when Daniel asked me to, because she was, he said at the time, very organized about that kind of thing. Gerald drew everything up. I signed it the 2nd week of January. I did not call Daniel to tell him. I did not send a letter. I went home, made myself dinner, watched the evening news, and slept better than I had in months. The January payment did not come. I know this because Melissa called me on the 8th of the month. Not Daniel. Melissa. She has my number, but she has not used it in probably 2 years. Not for anything personal. And hearing her voice on the phone had a strange quality to it, polite in a way that felt like a casing around something harder. She said she was calling to check on me. She said Daniel had mentioned I seemed upset about the holidays and she wanted to make sure I was doing all right. I said I was doing fine, thank you. She said they had been meaning to call. She said it had just been such a busy season. I said I understood. People get busy. There was a pause, and then she said she also wanted to mention that the deposit they normally expected had not come through and she wondered if there had been an issue with my bank. I said there had not been any issue with my bank. Another pause. She said, so then when could they expect it? I said they should not expect it. The quality of her voice changed then. Not dramatically. Melissa is too controlled for that. But something shifted underneath it. She said she was not sure she understood. I said it was fairly straightforward. I would no longer be covering the mortgage payments. I had been happy to help during a difficult period, but I felt the period had gone on long enough and I needed to redirect those funds. She asked, redirect them where? I said that was my business. She said this would put them in a very difficult position. I said I imagined it might, and that they would need to make some decisions, and I wished them luck with that, and I said goodbye. Daniel called 40 minutes later. I want to be honest with you about something. That phone call was the hardest part of all of this. Not because Daniel was cruel. He was not cruel. He was upset and he was scared and he was, I could tell, sitting somewhere in that house with Melissa, probably within earshot. And the way he spoke to me was the voice of a man trying to manage 2 directions at once. He said he did not understand what was happening. He said they had built their budget around the support and this was not something they could just absorb overnight. He said he thought we had an understanding. I said we had never had any written understanding. I said I had been giving freely because I wanted to, and now I was choosing not to, and that was the nature of a gift freely given. He said this felt like a punishment. I said, Daniel, you told me I wasn't welcome at Christmas dinner. You let your wife call me the following month asking about money as if the 2 things were completely unrelated. I am your father. I have been your father for 42 years. I want you to think about what you are asking me here. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said things with Melissa were complicated, and he was trying to hold everything together, and he needed me to understand. I said I did understand. I said I understood completely. I said I loved him and I would always love him, and that had nothing to do with a check. He asked if I would reconsider. I said I had not made this decision lightly and I was going to stand by it. He said he needed time to think and he would call me back. He has not called me back. That was 8 months ago. What happened in between is a series of smaller things that I have had to sit with quietly. In March, I drove up to Columbus on a Saturday, unannounced, because Ethan's birthday was that week, and I had a gift. I stood at the door and rang the bell, and Melissa answered, and the look on her face was brief but unmistakable, a flash of calculation before she arranged it into something neutral. She said Daniel was not home. I said, I knew. I had not come for Daniel. I had come for my grandson. She said Ethan was with a friend. I said I could wait. She said she was not sure how long that would be. We stood there for a moment. Then I held out the gift, a set of building blocks I had ordered, good hardwood ones, the kind that last decades if you take care of them. And I said, please make sure he gets these, and will you tell him his grandfather loves him? She took the package without a word and closed the door. I drove back to Dayton. In April, I got a card in the mail from an address I did not recognize at first. It was a hand-drawn card, the way children make them, a house and a sun and some lopsided letters, and inside it said, Happy Easter, Grandpa, I miss you, and it was signed Ethan in very careful 6-year-old handwriting. Underneath, in a different pen, it said he made this himself and wanted you to have it. The handwriting was Daniel's. I put that card on my refrigerator with a magnet, and I have not moved it. In May, I heard from Gerald that Melissa had apparently contacted the firm asking questions about my estate documents. She had not retained anyone formally. It seemed like she was fishing, and Gerald told her appropriately that he was not able to discuss my affairs with anyone other than me. He thought I should know. I thanked him. I have thought a great deal about whether I was too hard. I am not a man who acts rashly. I turned this over for weeks before I made a single call to Gerald. I thought about Daniel and what he has had to navigate in that house. And I do not think he is a bad person. I think he is a person who loves his wife and found it easier over time to accommodate her than to push back. And those accommodations added up until there was almost nothing left of the relationship he and I used to have. We used to go fishing. We used to watch football on Sunday afternoons and argue about the offensive line and eat the chili I made from a recipe that took me 15 years to get right. I miss those afternoons more than I can say. But I also remember standing on my porch with a pecan pie in the cold, being told by a woman who had not worked in 8 months that she needed a relaxed holiday. I remember the Christmas morning phone call where Daniel lowered his voice to apologize because she was in the next room. I remember the train set under the tree. There is a point at which being understanding becomes something else. It becomes permission. In July, something shifted. Daniel called me on a Sunday afternoon, not to talk about money, not to negotiate. He called and he said he had been doing a lot of thinking, and he said some things had happened that he was not ready to talk about in detail, but that he needed to tell me he was sorry. I did not push him on the details. I have been alive long enough to know when someone is standing at the edge of something and needs to be met gently. I said I accepted his apology, and I meant it. He asked if he could bring Ethan down to Dayton the following Saturday, just the two of them. I said yes. I said I would make the chili. He laughed. It was a small, tired laugh, but it was his real laugh, the one I have known since he was 8 years old, and something in my chest loosened that had been tight for a very long time. They came on Saturday. Ethan ran up the front walk and grabbed me around the legs and said, "Grandpa, you got a new bird feeder." And I said, "I did. I put it up in the spring." And he said, "Can we fill it?" And I said, "That is exactly what we are going to do." Daniel and I did not talk about Melissa. We did not talk about the money. We sat at the kitchen table after Ethan fell asleep on the couch, and we drank coffee, and we talked about his mother, about a trip the three of us took to the Smoky Mountains when he was 11, about the time she convinced us both to try square dancing at a county fair, and we were both terrible at it, and she laughed until she cried. We talked for 2 hours. Before he left, Daniel said he did not know what the future looked like. He said things were uncertain. He said he was sorry it had taken him this long. I said, "You are my son. That has never changed, and it is never going to change." He nodded. He did not say anything else, but he shook my hand in the doorway, the kind of handshake that is also something more, and he carried Ethan out to the car and strapped him in, and I watched them back out of the driveway until the taillights were gone. I went back inside and washed the coffee cups and turned off the kitchen light. I have not changed anything, Gerald drew up. The trust for Ethan stays exactly as it is. Whatever happens with Daniel and Melissa, my grandson's future is protected, and that decision I will not revisit. But I have started thinking about adding Daniel back in some form. Something modest. Something with conditions, but with meaning. Because he is my son, and he was standing at my kitchen table at 10 o'clock on a Saturday night, talking about his mother, and I could see the boy I raised in his face. I am not a soft man, but I have never confused being firm with being cold. My phone is on the table right now. Daniel texted an hour ago. It said just, "Dad, are you around this weekend? Thinking about coming down again if that's okay." Ethan keeps asking about the bird feeder. I have not answered yet. I am going to say yes. I was always going to say yes. But I sat here for a few minutes first, thinking about all of it. Thinking about what it costs to protect yourself and what it costs not to. Thinking about the check I wrote every month for 4 years to people who managed me out of Christmas. And thinking about a 6-year-old boy who drew me a card with a house and a son and very careful handwriting and told me he missed me. I know which one matters. I picked up the phone.